Okay, guys, bear with me as I am using the video function for the first time in one of my videos tonight. So we'll see how this goes. We're going to start talking about blood system, and it's actually going to be quite a bit shorter than it was last year. So hopefully you guys are okay with that. The primary function, when we are thinking about blood, we should think about transportation. And so through transportation, the blood maintains that constant environment. I have constant in quotations because, as we've talked about many times before, nothing is 100% one level. Our temperature, for example, is supposed to be around 98.6. That doesn't mean if you're 97.7, for example, that there's something majorly wrong with you, or if you get up to 100, you're starting to get feverish, but there's some fluctuation in the normal range. Okay, so that constant isn't an exact number or an exact state or environment. It's just kind of that fluctuation. Some things that the blood transports, we've heard about since we were little kids that it helps with transporting nutrients, gases, and waste. I don't think that's anything new that we're telling you. Some examples of transportation in the body. Nutrients from food, it passes through the small intestine. It's absorbed through the small intestine and then into the blood. The blood then carries those nutrients throughout the body to all the cells of the body. Okay, takes it to muscle cells so that the muscle cells can function and work, so that we can move our bodies. Takes it to our nerve cells so we can transmit those messages throughout the body, so that we know to move our hand. When we touch that hot stove or found any other stimulus. Red blood cells within the body are used, or within the blood, are used to transport oxygen to every cell in the body. Every cell in the body needs oxygen for it to do its function. It then transports the waste products, the byproducts that aren't used, the leftover products after the nutrients are pulled out. That extra waste then is removed through the body. Another form of waste, I suppose we could call it, is that carbon dioxide. Okay, so we bring oxygen in, we pull that oxygen from the blood. The product then that's made is carbon dioxide, and we expel that out through expiration. White blood cells, we're going to get more into white blood cells in a little bit, but white blood cells are those cells that fight infection. Very important thing that's going on in the world today right now with white blood cells and fighting infection. And then through transportation, it helps the blood to clot. Okay, when we're talking about the composition of blood, um, blood is made up of cells that are suspended in a straw-colored clear liquid. Okay, so if you look at the picture on the right, this would be if we were to go into the lab and a phlebotomist drew blood from a patient, and then you take the test tube and you put it in a centrifuge. And I think of a centrifuge as kind of like the rides. Um, I know my kids ride on a ride that's very similar to a centrifuge at the fall festival every fall. in Francisville, and it's one of those that it spins around and around, and it spins so fast that um, it kind of forces you to the outside edge, and um, it kind of settles everything down. Okay, so if you take a blood sample, you put it in a centrifuge, it's going to spin it so hard and so fast in a circle that all of the cells, the formed elements, will settle to the bottom, and the liquid component rises to the top. So this picture on the right shows that exactly. Shows the formed elements, the cells settling to the bottom, the plasma coming to the top. Okay. Um, what we call the um, cells are those formed elements. So it's not necessarily a solid, but it's more solid than the liquid that they're suspended in. That straw-colored liquid, or that top part of the center or of the test tube on the right, is what we call the plasma. So if any of you or have ever donated plasma or know anyone that's donated plasma, I know that Clay talks about having donated plasma in college to make extra spending cash. Um, from the process, from what I understand, is they would draw his blood, they would put it in a centrifuge and get all the red blood cells and the white blood cells to settle to the bottom. The plasma would rise to the top. They remove that plasma from that sample, and then they um, put the rest of it back in the body. Okay, so it was taking it out, um, processing it, I guess, and then putting the red blood cells back in the body. When we look at dividing up a sample of blood, 45% of that blood is made up the cells. Okay, the cells there's three different types of cells: erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. The other 55%, roughly, is that plasma. Okay, some things that make up plasma: water, proteins, sugars, salts, hormones, lipids, and vitamins. Remember that the plasma is that liquid portion, and the blood cells are the formed elements, the more solid portion of it. Okay. When we're talking about the blood cells, all blood cells originate in the marrow cavity of bones. And what is the marrow cavity that we remember calling it in the skeletal system? The medullary cavity. Red blood cells are responsible for carrying oxygen. And like we talked about, the white blood cells are responsible for fighting infection. There are 5 different types of white blood cells. Due to the manner of um, distance learning for the remainder of the year, we're going to simplify that a little bit for you guys this year. We're not going to get into the different types of white blood cells, but we're just going to know that white blood cells are responsible for fighting infection. When we're talking about the different blood cells, the first one we're going to talk about is erythrocytes. And if we took the word erythrocytes and we broke it down, we would pull out erythro and cyte. Erythro meaning red, cyte meaning cell. Hopefully that's a little bit of a review for you. As as red blood cells mature, they lose their nucleus and they take on a biconcave shape. Okay, if you look at the picture, you can see that if this were a better 3D picture, unfortunately we don't have that capability right now, but you can see that it's kind of concave here. And if we could see on the bottom is the same. It's kind of like a donut. Okay, that change in its shape helps to increase the absorption and the release of gases, because there's a lot more surface area because of that kind of disc-like shape. Okay, um, a lot more surface area, allows for a lot more oxygen to be absorbed and carbon dioxide to be released. When we're talking about erythrocytes, as they mature, they go from being called an erythroblast. Remember, blast means immature, to an erythrocyte. Remember, cyte, that it means mature cell. Okay. Um, Erythrocytes, when we think about erythrocytes, we think about red blood cells, of course. And when something, when blood is really, really bright red, it means it's more oxygenated. Okay. Um, and the hemoglobin that makes red blood um, cells red is the fact that it carries hemoglobin, which helps transport oxygen. Okay, looking at leukocytes, remember we call those, well, if we were going to break apart the word leukocyte, we would take out leuko and we would take out cyte. Leuko meaning white, cyte meaning cell. So um, they're white blood cells. They're less numerous than erythrocytes. Um, and like I had mentioned earlier, there are 5 different types. Okay, they all do different things as far as fighting infection. Some of them work more with allergic reactions. Some are different based on the way they engulf and destroy infections. But we're not going to worry about all that. We're not going to get into all that this year. We're just going to recognize that leukocytes are responsible for fighting off infection. And then finally, we're going to look at platelets. Okay. The main function of platelets is to help blood with clotting. When we're looking at this picture on the right here, this kind of white, funny shaped cell is the platelet. Okay. Of course, you can see the biconcave red blood cells in the background. Okay. So this would be like a sample of blood or all the formed elements under a microscope. So you can see all the different variations. Okay. We're going to stop there for today. Next time we will look at plasma and we'll start some vocabulary words. Let me know if you're having any issues with anything, and we can certainly revisit.